Dobre navike se ne menjaju, iako je konferencija.
Good habits die hard. Even though this is a conference intended for members of the press, I would first like to greet members of the Executive Board, members of the Council of the Governor, and I'm especially pleased to greet representatives of the International Monetary Fund, our esteemed friend Kim, and our dear Dmitry Kovtun, who has been a very appreciated member of the mission for a long time. Esteemed members of the press, after meeting last time at the first presentation of the Financial Stability Report, I now welcome you to the already traditional presentation of the inflation report. As before, we will give an outline of recent monetary and macroeconomic developments and present our view of their future path and their impact on monetary policy decisions. Since our monetary policy is predictable, the results are unquestionable and evident. So allow me to be a bit different than before. So let us get out of the comfort and abstract zone. I will leave this to my colleague Branko Hinic, who will give you the charts, the tables, and the details, and he will explain the results we have achieved. I will allow myself to be a bit different this time and to address you now when the half of my term in office has been completed. This happened on the 7th of August this year. I will tell you that before you see only a part of the institution called the National Bank of Serbia, which in the most extraordinary way will try to can be presented as a Cinderella who has patiently and arduously worked for 3 years in order to be able to present to you today stable and low inflation. Anchored inflation expectations, low key policy rate, that is a key policy rate which has been cut from 11.75% to 5.5%. And now we can explain our results, we can present our results embodied in low inflation. Low inflation is a result of our patient and industrious work. Inflation currently stands at 1% year on year, and for those who don't like to go back, it stood at 12.8% in 2013 when it was at its peak. So people get accustomed to everything that is good very easily. But if I had to put in a nutshell everything that the National Bank of Serbia is doing, I could call it, I could label it as stability. Stability is defined by law as price stability and as stability of the financial system. So 2 objectives, one of which is our primary objective as highlighted in the law, and the secondary objective which is complementary to the first one. So this stability was achieved by people who are sitting here at this table, some of the people who are sitting in the audience, and there are no little dwarfs or or elves who come here overnight to do something extraordinary with their magic wand. We are talking about people, the majority of whom was here even before I became governor. But obviously, as Branko Hinić or Veselin put it once, they needed a good captain who was passionate to succeed, who wanted to succeed, and to share this success with his or her associates, and because of all of us living in this country. Inflation developments will be presented by Branko, and I will say that we did our best to keep the money in the pockets of ordinary people, to keep the money in the pockets of ordinary people. And we didn't want to, so the inflationary tax, you cannot accuse the proposer of the tax law, because the proposer is not the National Bank of Serbia, not the government, nor any individual person within a narrow circle of proposers. This inflation tax no longer exists. What I also wanted to say is that the circumstances did not go our way exactly, but we did not complain much. Branko, Mirko Đukić, Snežana Vilaret, Mirjana Miletić. Many people whom you do not know and whose names are Milan Trajković, Vanja Gobović, Danka Simović, Vuk Kustodić, Marina Komatina, Jelena Marević. Maybe I have left some people out, but I have mentioned only the most prominent figures from the Directorate of Economic Research and Statistics. There are Danilo Cerović. So all the people who work on this are these little dwarves and elves who carefully monitor inflation developments and inflation projections and enable us to make informed monetary policy decisions. One thing is certain. I'm not an easy person to cooperate with, so my associates do not have an easy time. Our preparatory meetings for the Executive Board meetings are very hard, because I always meet the obligations and deliver my duty. I will not be a governor who only presents facts. I will not be a governor who is the editor-in-chief and who only does what he is told to do, but rather a governor who fully, honestly and passionately does his job and makes decisions along with members of the Executive Board and in cooperation and coordination with the expert units of the National Bank of Serbia. Before I give the floor to Mr. Branko Hinić, I will I will share some good news with you. After long consideration, and in a conservative way we tend to apply, the National Bank of Serbia has decided to announce today, and Branko will explain this, that GDP growth, according to our projections, will go from the negative zone to 0.5%. So this is good news based on projections that we have devised at the National Bank of Serbia. What I also wanted to say is that for us, low and stable inflation, and we have not changed our inflation target for 2017 and 2018. It has remained at 4 plus minus 1.5%, because we are in the process of convergence towards EU price levels, and we are not those who will move the target as it suits them. So the target remains appropriate to the circumstances, and even though we are below the target currently, I am pleased to confess that we are at below the lower bound of the target tolerance band, but we will trend closer to the target around mid-2016. This, that we are at the lower bound of the target tolerance band, means that real household income of our citizens will be higher, and they will be able to buy more, and what they have will be worth more. But the questions I ask my associates, who, as I said, do not have an easy time with me, nor do I have it with them, is the following. We are unsuccessful in the eyes of everybody. Expert public says you are below the target. The citizens say this inflation of yours at monthly level, which is actually deflation of minus 0.9%, is invisible for us in reality. Our colleague Branko Urošević, a professor who teaches at the School of Economics, said that one of his neighbors from Valjevo said, "We're okay, we're doing fine, but this inflation is really killing us." For them, inflation is high. I say this to my associates. I went to a store and saw that a kilogram of tomatoes is 47 dinars, one type of tomatoes, and another type is 117 dinars. And then I asked them, what is the price that we use as the average price? Out of what stores? How do we weight these figures? And how can we tell the citizens that the methodology of measuring prices included in the CPI basket is the one they themselves have to recognize as a fact, as a reality. I did not wait long to receive an answer. Snežana Vilarec prepared the answer very quickly, and she will explain to you in detail which products are now cheaper relative to the previous year, because neither with inflation nor with the measuring of individual product prices does the National Bank expect to everything go under its way, because the only thing that can last and that can be recognized is the truth and the passion that you fight with for good results, which imply truthful and accurate data and carefully set priorities. We do have them. Of course, there are many unfinished jobs, but the fact that we have achieved price stability and financial stability cannot be ignored by anybody. And the fact that we are below the target, below the inflation target, trust me, I consider this as my success. Sometimes in a debate you win by withdrawing from the debate, for instance with your family, with your kids, with those who are dear to you. And so it is that we withdraw because this is in the interest of the citizens of Serbia. And Branko will explain the possibilities to increase segregate demand. Please do not take this amiss. I just had to go on a more personal note because half of my term in office has finished. Branko.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed members of the press and fellow economists, welcome to the presentation of the August Inflation Report, where we will set out our analysis of the current and expected economic developments and also explain the decisions the National Bank of Serbia has taken in accordance with these analyses. Since we last met in May, year-on-year inflation has continued moving below the lower bound of the target tolerance band, while GDP turned out to be higher in the second quarter than expected earlier. The current inflation projection is lower than the one released in May because primary commodity prices were lower than anticipated before. In accordance with this, inflation is projected to revolve around the lower bound of the target tolerance band until mid-2016, whereafter it will gradually trend closer to the 4% target. The projection of GDP growth in 2015 has been revised up from 0 to 0.5%, as it appears that a decline in domestic consumption will be smaller than previously expected. Like in May, we expect GDP growth to amount to 1.5% in 2016, led by investment and net exports, and to a lesser degree by household consumption. As favorable fiscal developments continue, we expect a lower budget deficit this year than initially projected. The reduction in internal imbalances goes in parallel with further narrowing of external imbalances. In the first half of the year, the current account deficit contracted by around 30% relative to the same period a year earlier and is expected to amount to slightly over 4% of GDP in the year as a whole. Responding to lower inflationary pressures, the National Bank of Serbia proceeded with monetary policy easing and lowered the key policy rate to 5.5%. We expect the markets will react accordingly. That is, that we will see a further fall in dinner interest rates in the money and credit markets, which should contribute to the recovery of the domestic economy. Monetary policies implemented by leading central banks remain accommodative, which, together with low international oil prices, creates favorable conditions for global economic recovery. Looking ahead, the European Central Bank will be implementing increasingly accommodative monetary policy, while the Fed is nearing the decision to start raising its policy rate. As it largely determines global liquidity, the future monetary policy stance of the Fed is one of the key factors of uncertainty in the international environment. The markets expect the Fed will start raising its rate before the year ends, but there are some views that the Fed's decision could be postponed after last week's devaluation of the Chinese yuan. Economic activity of the euro area has been gathering pace steadily since the end of the last year, aided by the European Central Bank's monetary policy measures, low oil prices, and the weakening of the euro. Positive effects of the euro area growth are spreading to Central and East European countries. High global liquidity remains conducive to capital inflows into these countries, which, coupled with low oil prices and low inflation, enables their central banks to ease their monetary policies further and thus contribute to economic recovery. Significant for this region, Serbia included, is the easing of uncertainties over the Greek crisis. Not so much because of the direct effects of that crisis, but because of its indirect effects through the impact on the international financial market and the euro area economy. So far, the Greek crisis has not caused any major turmoil in the international financial market or investors' exit from riskier assets. It seems that the more important question is whether the Greek crisis will constrain growth of the euro area economy, which absorbs around 45% of our exports. For the time being, the majority of leading institutions and analysts have kept their growth projections for the euro area unchanged. Oil price movements represent yet another significant sort of uncertainty in the international environment. The expectation that the Fed's rate hike will be delayed led to a temporary weakening of the US dollar, which supported the recovery of oil prices in the second quarter. However, oil prices resumed a decline in July, falling to below $50 per barrel. There should be no major increase in oil prices until the end of the year, given the still high global inventories, Iran's return to the market, and an uncertain pace of global recovery. Despite persistent uncertainty in the international environment, Serbia's risk premium, measured by Emerging Market Bond Index, was relatively stable at around 290 basis points over the past several months, owing to domestic factors, notably improved fiscal and external position of the country and successfully completed first review of the arrangement with the International Monetary Fund. These movements also contributed to stronger appreciation pressures. In order to ease excessive short-term volatility of the exchange rate, but without any intention to influence its trend, the National Bank of Serbia intervened in the interbank foreign exchange market from April to end July by buying 380 million euros and selling 30 million euros. GDP growth exceeded our expectations in the second quarter and amounted to 1.9 seasonally adjusted, thanks to good results in industry and construction. The upturn in industrial production was supported by low energy prices on the cost side and by the recovery of the euro area on the demand side. The recovery of the construction industry was aided by the stepped-up implementation of capital projects and new legal solutions in that area. On the expenditure side, the business environment reforms, along with the improvement in the financial position of enterprises attributable primarily to the fall in oil prices, exerted a positive impact on private investment. The resulting rise in private investment and smaller than expected negative effects of fiscal consolidation and final consumption were the main reason behind the positive contribution of domestic demand to GDP growth in the second quarter. GDP grew in year-on-year terms as well, rising by 0.9%, owing chiefly to the recovery of mining and energy sectors from last year's floods. We expect GDP to grow by 0.5% this year, in contrast to the May projection when we expected stagnation. These expectations are underpinned by better performances of the industry and construction sector, although a drop in agricultural production will be steeper than expected due to a drought. On the expenditure side, consistent fiscal adjustment, followed by the implementation of structural reforms, is likely to result in high investments and net exports. A negative contribution to GDP this year is expected from final consumption. Still, this contribution will be smaller than earlier expected, which was the main reason for the revision of GDP growth projection for 2015. A smaller drop in consumption is expected owing to several factors: higher disposable income of households owing to a decline in petroleum product prices, rising remittances and an increase in private sector wage bill, but also owing to low inflation. Although the recovery of external demand positively affects our exports, the contribution of net exports will be lower as imports will go up on account of elevated investments and a more moderate decline in consumption. GDP growth in 2016 should be led by investments and net exports, while a positive contribution is likely also from household consumption. Consistent with further fiscal adjustment, government consumption is expected to decline next year as well. Uncertainties associated with the GDP projection relate to the outcome of this year's agricultural season, the speed of economic recovery of the euro area, and effects of fiscal consolidation and structural reforms. Inflationary pressures remained low in the second quarter. As a result of the majority of domestic factors, subdued inflation in the international environment and low prices of primary commodities in the world market. Year-on-year inflation continued to move below the lower bound of the target tolerance band. It reached 1% in July on account of a vigorous decline in vegetable prices. Inflation moved below the target, reflecting primarily the absence of expected administered price adjustments over the past year and a fall in petroleum product prices triggered by tumbling global oil prices late last year and early this year. As a result of low inflation and muted inflationary pressures, both 1 year ahead and medium-term inflation expectations stabilized within the target band, which is the key prerequisite for stabilization of inflation and greater efficiency of monetary policy measures. Under our central projection, year-on-year inflation will move around the lower bound of the target tolerance band over the coming 12 months, possibly entering the target band late this year or early next year. Inflation is expected to trend closer to the 4% target in the second half of 2016. In contrast to the prior period, administered prices will also give a positive contribution to inflation in the coming period, notably the August electricity price increase. Another inflationary factor will be low last year's base, resulting primarily from a reduction in prices of cigarettes and petroleum products in 2014. Disinflationary pressures will be generated by low global oil prices, weak aggregate demand, low inflation in the international environment, and tight fiscal policy at home. In respect of food, we expect a moderate increase in prices of industrial food products due to rising prices of raw materials in their production, that is, prices of individual primary agricultural commodities hit by the drought. In the first half of the year, fruit and vegetable prices were at a high level. Therefore, despite the drought, these prices are expected to record, because of the base effect, lower year-on-year growth in the remainder of the year. The risks to the projected inflation path relate to movements in prices of primary agricultural commodities and their impact on food prices. Other risks concern the impact of developments in the international environment on the country's risk premium and capital inflow, and to a certain extent the movement in administered prices in 2016. Consistent with low inflationary pressures, the key policy rate was lowered in June for the fourth month in a row by 50 basis points to 6%. In July, the key policy rate was kept unchanged, only to be cut in August, again by 50 basis points to 5.5%. External risks have lessened after Greece reached an agreement with international creditors, which, along with Serbia's arrangement with the International Monetary Fund and more favorable than expected economic and balance of payments performances, contributes to relative stability of the foreign exchange market and improve investor perception. Having this in mind, as well as the disinflationary effect of the majority of domestic factors, low inflation abroad and stabilization of inflation expectations within the target tolerance band, the Executive Board decided to continue with monetary policy easing in August. As external risks persist, the character of monetary policy will depend primarily on the assessment of their potential inflationary effect. An important factor will also be this year's agricultural season, that is, movement in primary agricultural prices in the domestic and international markets. We expect that further successful implementation of fiscal consolidation measures and structural reforms, along with the arrangement with the International Monetary Fund, will contribute to the sustainability of public finances and further improvement of macroeconomic prospects of the country. This will diminish the exposure of the domestic economy to adverse external shocks and further improve the conditions for economic growth. Thank you.
I would kindly ask Sneža, before the question and answer session begins, to explain what the citizens are most interested in. Some citizens say that their impression is that inflation is high, and we are arguing that we are faced with deflation. So we're talking about the subjective impression of each individual in accordance with his disposable income and his preferences. Consumer price index is an official measure of inflation in Serbia. It comprises 600 services and goods. What's very important to note is that the largest number of staples and services, the prices of the largest number of staples and services have either stagnated or even declined over the past year. So food as a whole group, which includes unprocessed food, prices, fruit and vegetables, and industrial food products, which includes meat. So all of these categories were on the decline. So vegetables in June this year, relative to June last year, was down by 5%. Meat was down by 10%, 40%. Poultry was 20% lower than last year. Pork was on average by 8% lower. Also, another very important component are petroleum products. In July this year, they were by 5% lower than in July last year. The kindergarten services are very important services in the structure of CPI basket recorded a 30% decline. Fixed telephony services recorded a 6% decline. So, as I said, the largest number of key staples and services were either stagnant or they recorded decline. Pharmaceutical products also, their prices also declined in July relative to July last year. So depending on the group of medicaments, the decline varied from 9 to 10%. Articles of apparel and footwear also declined from 3 to 5% year on year. Thank you, Sneža. So, ladies and gentlemen, the floor is yours. I apologize for the delay. Mira Brajković from RTS. Since representatives of the IMF are here with us, I guess that we are all most interested in is how you expect forthcoming negotiations with the IMF to evolve. And the second question would be, what is your plan for MPL resolution? Unfortunately, we journalists did not receive any specific information from the government how this problem will be solved, and this was also one of the key items envisaged by the arrangement with the IMF. Thank you. I will be very brief, and then maybe some of my colleagues may add something. So first of all, cooperation with the IMF can be translated, can be described through a very simple requirement, and this is called comply or explain. So either apply what you agreed to or explain why you cannot do so. So the IMF is our partner, and not for a single moment has the Greek crisis nor the Troika stance has interfered with our partner relations, because we are guided by a common goal. We want to achieve a specific result, and this result is the following: by relying on the experience and support and the expertise of the people who work for the IMF, and by responding to their commitment to making this precautionary arrangement successful, and for making this success Serbia's long-term success, cannot be jeopardized by anybody or anything. The National Bank of Serbia is looking forward to the next mission and to the meetings with the IMF, but in the meantime maintains a continuous communication with representatives of the International Monetary Fund. And this has been this way since I came to the National Bank of Serbia. I can tell you that cooperation with the IMF is very high, it is excellent, and it has been such even before we concluded the new arrangement. And for us, it is not enough only to comply with the formal criteria, and so far we have complied with them as agreed. The arrangement is fully on track, but what matters to us more is that this result is felt by those because of whom we work, people who live in Serbia. We want them to feel this result through with their purchasing power and employment. What I can say in the presence of the representatives of the IMF is that the dialogue we have, the openness and direct communication is the key quality that features our that marks our cooperation. There are no secrets. There is no reason to disguise any data. And I will now answer your second question. One of the most important commitments we have assumed within financial stability is the resolution of non-performing loans. I have to say that cautious and in presenting our plans to the public that we have been taught from the IMF is one of the most valuable things we learned from them. We have a saying in Serbia, think before you jump, and this is what we do with their support and assistance. The strategy, the MPL resolution strategy, has been adopted on the 13th of August. On the same day, the Executive Board of the National Bank of Serbia adopted the action plan for MPL resolution, and the National Bank of Serbia is only one of the institutions working on this problem, and to which the government does not issue any orders, because the National Bank of Serbia is an autonomous and independent institution. I think that today on the websites of all ministries and the National Bank of Serbia you will be able to find a summary of that strategy, which define the activities we all have to implement. I can talk about the activities we have to implement until the end of September, along with the AQR tests, that is special diagnostic studies, the examination and assessment of the quality of assets in banks. We will be able to do a qualitative analysis based on which we will determine ways to untie the Gordian knot. And one of the most interesting questions for you here is the liberalization of the market, that is the sale of non-performing loans of natural persons. In order to avoid any confusion, after careful analysis, And even before we regulate the protection of natural persons, the way of licensing the institutions who would engage in the sale of natural persons, NPLs, if we opt for that solution, then the supervision of those potential buyers who would later on trade in non-performing loans of natural persons. So all of these factors need to be settled in order to have benefits from this process rather than harm. This means that the hitherto way of selling non-performing loans of natural persons to banks only is something that is defined by the law on the protection of financial services consumers. So it is impossible for anybody else other than banks to sell such receivables. In order to liberalize that market, we have to do some prior activities. We have to do this qualitative analysis. We have to be cautious when it comes to licensing and supervision of these institutions, and we have to ensure the protection of those natural persons in order to be able to speak about any concrete measures. So we don't want to be hasty, and we are very serious in doing our job. We are considering all the relevant aspects with other stakeholders, and once we need the public to help us in implementing one of the possible solutions of this segment of non-performing loans, we will timely include you and inform you thereof.
Može. Svetlana Milenković-Popović, Prva televizija. Ja moram sad da se nadovežem na koleginicu oko naplativih kredita i uopšte oko banaka. Možemo se vratimo samo malo, možda i nekoliko godina unazad. Kod nas poslije skoro 30 banaka, istovremeno gomila banaka se ugasila, Beobanka, Investbanka, sve su još uvek u stečaju, nije se to završilo. I oni imaju brojne kredite i brojna dugovanja, pogotovo preduzeću restrukturiranju kojem nisu vraćena. Sve vreme se i ljudi zadužuju kod novih banaka, a istovremeno ćemo i nešto ovo malo još domaćih banaka da prodamo. Prosto, kad će se taj krug zatvoriti? Da li tu možda treba stati tome na put, kada će eventualno naša preduzeća poslati preko domaće banke ili mi to ne umemo?
Or is this something that we are not able to do? All banks operating in the market of the Republic of Serbia are domestic banks, irrespective of the fact that their founders are coming from abroad. The best proof that they are behaving and acting as domestic banks is the Greek crisis, when we have kept you informed rather than assured you that it is impossible to withdraw a founder's stake and that we are able to control the flows between subsidiaries in Serbia and their parent banks, because these banks here are separate legal entities. So this is a concrete answer. I have to stress that monitoring the situation with Greek banks has made it much easier for us to advise the manner of monitoring monitoring. That we have been much helped by the ECB, by the IMF, and by other central banks in the region which face similar problems. I want to say that the Central Bank of Serbia, the National Bank of Serbia, is almost a part of the European monetary area, European monetary space, even though we are not a member of the European Union, because by the very nature of the linkages of financial flows. You have mentioned the banks in bankruptcy. I am one of those people who I cannot say who hates, but who doesn't like the wording "we are not competent for that"? Because when somebody tells you that he's not competent for something, it means that he is absolved from responsibility. But competence for the bankruptcy of large four banks is the Agency for Deposit Insurance, and this is the right address for your question. Maybe we should ask them why these procedures take so long. But the Deposit Insurance Agency is also involved in the working group for the resolution of non-performing loans, and we really expect this part of the procedures who are within the competence of the agency, but also the problems that are within the competence of the Ministry of Justice, resolution, restructuring issues, the bankruptcy legislation, which all of these solutions are defined well in laws but are not implemented well in practice. So all of these ministries are included in the working group for NPL resolution. So the National Bank of Serbia, the Ministry of Justice, the Ministry of Economy, the Ministry of Finance, the Chamber of Commerce, so they're all stakeholders in the process and play an important role. I'm not someone who observes patriotism through the prism of domestic banks. I don't think that a bank is domestic if it is founded by the state. Even though from -2, I came to this office because of a political background. Everybody has to admit, if they have any honor at all, that the only qualification my associates have to have is whether they do their job in the best possible way, whether they are professional, not whether they're affiliated with somebody or something. So I take the same approach when it comes to banks. The National Bank of Serbia must be equal, must behave equally towards all market participants. The National Bank of Serbia is not pursuing a stimulating industrial or financial policy, let us call it that way. This is something that is within the competence of executive authority. It is up to us to be equal to everybody, and we prove this by reconciling conflicting objectives of exporters, importers, creditors, debtors, citizens, because with the stability of the exchange rate, with the stability of prices, we put them all into an equal position. So this unbiased approach is appropriate to the National Bank of Serbia, which, rather than using the word credibility, I could use a Serbian word, which is confidence that the National Bank of Serbia enjoys. And we have deserved this confidence by the fact that we have inherited quite a number of problems in the banking sector. And I will now repeat a sentence of Churchill, which characterizes the inherited situation in the Serbian banking sector. I'm thinking about Univerzal Banka, Agrobanka, and Razvojna Banka Vojvodine. So we have closed down 4 banks, one of them private-owned, and the others were in state ownership. So the Churchill's statement is as follows: after years of foggy and confusing solutions, after a period of delays, we have faced the consequences. So in the period of consequences of those foggy and confusing solutions and of delaying problems, the National Bank of Serbia has reacted in the only possible way, by protecting financial stability of the country, by closing down and excluding those participants from the market who did not deserve to stay. And the only thing we expect is that the minutes, the record keeping of meetings at the National Bank of Serbia will serve to all authorities doing their job, so that the costs which are part of the budget costs and a part of the depleted budget of the Deposit Insurance Agency, who was based on contributions of banks, I expect that this will result in, because as you all know, money, even in electronic form, is not steam, it is not invisible, its flows can be traced, they can be recorded, and the illegalities can be determined, and somebody needs to be held responsible for that. Of course, I will focus on my courtyard, on the National Bank of Serbia. We never defended ourselves before that. The government did not do everything it had to do. It did not raise administered prices or decrease them. We did our part of the job rather than complaining. We did not wait for fiscal consolidation. Within monetary policy measures, we did our best, even at the time of pre-election campaign and election campaign, to maintain stability to the greatest possible extent. Why am I mentioning elections? Not because of the possibility that somebody would influence the National Bank of Serbia, because I can proudly say that there are no such pressures, but banking and the National Bank of Serbia rest on confidence. And when the crossfire begins between the ruling party and the opposition parties, and when strong words are used, then the confidence in the stability is shaken, and this is something that we have experienced. I think you all remember that, because I remember the time when, because of interventions in the interbank foreign exchange market, we had to spend our foreign exchange reserves, but happily the circumstances changed and foreign exchange reserves increased. We are buying foreign exchange in the interbank foreign exchange market now. One of the members of the Council of the Governor asked me what is the secret of a stable exchange rate. And I told him to read our press releases on the movement in our foreign exchange reserves. But I can tell you now that the secret is that we are not sticking only to rules and to books, and we are adhering to our objective, which is stability. We tend to use one instrument, one goal, not only the key policy rate, but interventions in the foreign exchange market as well, if necessary, because these interventions have helped us to counter several episodes of sudden withdrawals. And there were also episodes of geopolitical tensions, and these interventions helped us maintain the stability of the dinar, and as a result the dinar weakened the least compared to other currencies in the region. I don't want other departments of the National Bank of Serbia to be offended. They are not forgotten, because the Directorate for Economic Statistics and Research is not the only one to be credited for the success. Other departments are to be credited with success too. The Monetary Operations Department that are in charge of, led by Mr. Zoroja. There is an Enforced Collection Department, Payment System Department, the Institute for Manufacturing Banknotes and Coins. So all of the services and units that operate within the National Bank of Serbia, the Administration for Supervision of Financial Institutions. There are more than 2,200 people working at the National Bank of Serbia. But something that was not practiced before, and now it is that the National Bank of Serbia is not an isolated island. It has an excellent communication with the key participants in the interbank foreign exchange market. And this cooperation and communication has not been developed based on any formal orders or coercive measures, but rather we have a situation where all institutions, NIS, Elektroprivreda Srbije, Railways of Serbia, and private enterprises which appear in the market, they announce to our people working in the monetary operations department, they announce their transactions and ask how they can implement those transactions without causing any disruptions to the stability of the foreign exchange market. Mr. Kovačević, this is a part of our secret. And as Veselin said, we cannot tell you everything. We cannot share everything with you. So Mr. Kovačević didn't realize this until I put it modestly as I can be. This happened from the change in our repo operations from December, when we do not accept all excess liquidity of banks at the highest repo rate, but implement variable interest rate, and banks offer their excess liquidity for 1-week repos. So we have saved money to the government on the borrowing. So we have saved 285 million euros. Because, yes, the key policy rate was 11% and then 8%, but the corridor, the effective rate achieved at those repo auctions ranged from 2 to 2.5%. It was 2 to 2.5% lower than the key policy rate, which affects only 30% of total financial flows in Serbia. And now this means that if you have saved money for the government, and I will not even mention the savings the National Bank of Serbia has made. I have to call the National Bank of Serbia a Cinderella who is not by the competence of expert people, who was not always supported, but was called out for some things that don't deserve to be mentioned here. But of course we will always be open to any criticism, to any debate. When it comes to inflation targeting, exchange rate stability, there is no topic within our remit that will not be accepted as a basis for a debate with all well-intentioned, good-intentioned and interested stakeholders in the market. Veselin and his team have a fantastic team, and they talk to all investors before they go to the government. But our job boils down to working behind the curtain. Our people work silently, these elves and dwarves who prepare new investor presentation each month. But all of those financing the inherited deficits of the Republic of Serbia want to come to the National Bank of Serbia first and discuss with those people macroeconomic projections and inflation projections. Mira, why are you laughing? Because I have called you elves. I've mentioned here young people. So when I mentioned people from the Directorate for Economic Statistics and Research, I mentioned the youngest one. For instance, Vuk Kusturić came to work for the National Bank of Serbia in 2012, because those members of staff who are older have such loyalty towards the National Bank of Serbia that they will never blackmail you with a higher salary and condition their staying with a higher pay. Their support and loyalty is unconditional. And I'm fighting for these young people to stay here at the National Bank of Serbia, because the institution is not a mere building. The institution means people who work for the institution. Maybe it's funny for you, but I'm sure you will not forget this. I apologize for taking so long.
First of all, I would like to know, why do you have these interventions almost on a daily basis? What's the pressure on the dinner? And what are these daily volatilities that you do so? The second question is, until which point are you going to hold Greek banks under this restrictive regime, and what's the situation with that as well? And finally, I would like to ask you, to what extent are you, as a supervisor, worried about the falling profit of the commercial bank? Yeah, rate is your specialty. Well, the National Bank of Serbia, I'm going to probably repeat myself or something that has already been said here. Since the beginning of the year, the NBS in the interbank FX market in January and February, and once in April, intervened by selling. But since March, we have been permanently acting as buyers in the market. At times, we are motivated in this, our actions are motivated by preventing volatility, but at other days, we want to increase the profit. For instance, yesterday, the turnover in the interbank FX market was as low as 0.4 million euros, so only until half past 12. But after our intervention, it multiplied. It was multiplied by 100. And finally, at the end of the day, we had 40 million. So our intervention in the interbank FX market is also consistent with using the key tool of the monetary policy instrument, which is the key policy rate. And since the beginning of the year, we have trimmed it and intervened on the purchase side. And it is natural that after the trimming of the key policy rate, it is natural that there are certain pressures in the interbank FX market that works toward the depreciation of it. And we faced an opposite situation. And we did not want to have any daily changes that would lead to capital losses or capital losses to certain or particular participants, and that's something we've done in the past, and that's something probably we're going to do in the future. We want to intervene in the best possible way as to enable functioning of the FX market, but also to prevent the excessive moving of the rate to one point. I would also like to say, Gordana surely remembers in 2012, which was very illustrious example, that it is not enough to simply abide by these books, the school books. On the other hand, it is necessary to have this free fluctuation of the rate. For in that year, in 2012, the dinner fell by 20%. We used 1,400 million from our FX reserves, and we had, of course, no result at the same time. So our interventions does not intend to suffocate the market, so to say, God forbid, but it is in order to keep some strict numeric value. But when you deal and we try to assess the volatility, is to see whether what short-term and domestic and international market, and probably the best elaboration of this is that we have this long position of banks, and that on the other hand we have balance in the balance sheet, and also we have increased offer of foreign exchange in the interbank market, and then there is no reason to use smoking glass to present some sort of strengthening of the dinner, which truly is not concrete, and it does not rely on sustainable fundamentals. The NBS does indeed have the role of maintaining stability, where we will not have this actors who are temporarily gainers or losers, but we want to act with long terms inside. Also, the other question was whether Komercijalna Banka worries me. Apparently, you know something more than I do. Komercijalna banka is more important to us, but only to extent to which it qualifies or disqualifies the state as the owner, and it has international investors in its management structure. Only to that extent. But we are, of course, interested to equal extent for profit of all banks, and due to say, a bit late financial statements and the implementation of the new accounting law, we cannot speak truly of their positions, and our AQR tests have been a bit delayed simply due to this delay of submitting financial statements. But when we start talking about this, we will look at the banking system as a whole, and neither do we intend, nor will we take a very easygoing approach and let go of the control regarding the Greek banks, simply because all risks regarding the Greek crisis have not yet been mitigated nor cushioned, and we monitor these banks on a daily basis, and I think it is quite early to speak of lifting any sort of restrictions that are currently imposed.
Recently, when you talked about non-performing loans and the solving of this problem, you have mentioned the licensing of competent institutions. I was wondering, are there any predictions when the first licenses could be issued, and when the market of these NPLs could come into existence and become operational? I did not announce the licensing of these institutions. I announced the analysis which should cover all problems that I have enumerated. So the protection of natural persons, the existence of these new institutions, if we decide to liberalize that segment of the market, the manner in which they will be licensed. So these are only issues that need to be tackled and analyzed, and this analysis will not be completed before the end of the year, not because we are slow, but because we are thorough, and we are not the front leader of this team, but it's still too early to discuss this. A minute ago, you told us that you were in constant communication with the IMF, irrespective of the reviews of the arrangement, and you also told us that there are no secrets. So, based on this familiarity of yours, I would kindly ask you to tell us whether it is reasonable to expect that they will revise their GDP growth projection to 0.5%, and is it reasonable to expect that they will allow us to increase wages and salaries? And since Mr. Kim is here with us for the first time, I would kindly ask him to address us as well. First of all, this is not a precedent. Mr. Kim is not here for the first time. He supports all our activities, all our press conferences devoted to the functions, to everything the National Bank of Serbia does. You are very skillful, I have to say, as a journalist, but my practice and experience on the one hand, and even more so, the respect I have for the people who are sitting here with us, and for those who are not with us, my respect for them is so high that I will not answer this question, not because I don't have the right to answer in their name, but not to provoke them to say anything prematurely. So if I have learned anything from them, it is to be patient and to be moderate in communication, because the objective is more important to us than anything, and what is said once should not be refuted. And I believe that you will be able to talk about this with representatives of the International Monetary Fund in about 10 days when the mission nears its end, because they are very serious in doing their job. They carefully analyze every balance sheet, all projections and scenarios, and this projection of ours will maybe be confirmed by them. I believe it will be so, but only once they are assured of the sustainability of that projection and of its feasibility. So Mr. Kim is here under my protection.
Thank you very much. Actually, in fact, I have never missed the inflation report presentation because it's so informative, as long as I'm in Belgrade. And regarding your question, actually, this is the exact region that the IMF mission is coming. So we will discuss. And then, you know, this is going to be a disrespect for the Serbian authorities if we say something without talking to them, because we are here to talk and listen and then find the middle ground or find a better solution. Okay? So be patient, wait for the 10 days. We will have a press conference and then we will be able to answer all of your questions if we find a conclusion. Okay? Thank you.
We may conclude, because I wouldn't like to comment anything after the International Monetary Fund. Thank you all for coming. And once again, I would like to extend special thanks to my associates.